A widow opens her mail and finds out that the government thinks she's dead. Her Social Security check, gone. Her bank account, frozen. She's standing in her kitchen, holding a letter. They killed her on paper, and she's one name. But there was a list with 2.7 million more, and a federal employee was handed it and told to make every one of them disappear the same exact way. Watch this.
There was a headline that flew by a couple of days ago, and it didn't get near the attention it deserved on social, so I'm going to take you through it right now. Because while it could have been so much worse than these headlines implied, what we actually ended up with was an example for how to defeat fascism. Now, the headline was that a former federal employee last week blew the whistle on some Stephen Miller bullshit. And after reading through his testimony, I realized nobody fully appreciates how close we came to a true humanitarian disaster. So here's what we learned. Last year, DOGE facilitated the handoff of a list of 2.7 million people from DHS to the Social Security Administration. And that list came with an ask to mark all 2.7 million people deceased. This simple flag would deactivate your Social Security number, freeze your bank account, cancel payroll and employment, and disqualify you from housing, insurance, and credit. But believe it or not, that's not the malicious part. That's just the trap. Because the goal was to force those 2.7 million people to make a choice. Do you panic and self-deport, or do you make the most likely choice? You go to the Social Security office to prove you're still alive. And that right there is where the trap snaps shut. Because just like we've seen at immigration hearings, daycares, hospitals, and family-friendly festivals, their plan was for ICE to be waiting at those locations. So these people would walk in the front door to fix a government error, but leave through the back door dragged in shackles by Trump's private militia. Because we learned from the testimony they tried to pair this move with an effort to mass revoke legal residency at scale. So people wouldn't find out they're no longer allowed to be in this country and now subject to deportation until they showed up at the Social Security office to prove they're still alive. But as they tried to bring this plan to life, a career civil servant with 25 years of experience named Jeremiah Schofield ran a random spot check on 25 of these 2.7 million people and found they were all alive and they were all either citizens or legal residents. So he simply refused the order. And that was when one of Donald Trump's DOGE employees said, well, don't call them dead then, just call them ineligible. Since death is just one form of ineligibility, because to DOGE calling them dead was just a means to an end. The real goal was to make their lives so miserable they either left on their own or they showed up to be deported. And this is the crazy part, because the reason this whole thing didn't come to life wasn't because of a federal judge or because of Congress. It was because Schofield refused an order, and he was then backed up by the internal legal team within Social Security, which together created enough friction for them to simply choose to pick another fight somewhere else. And that's a thing we have to remember. The only thing these people are more than they are cruel is incompetent, which means thanks to Schofield, instead of having a humanitarian catastrophe, what we have is a templatized example for how to leverage the incompetence of a fascist regime against them.
He says it almost happened, but I'm going to take that word back, because before the 2.7 million, there was a smaller list, and that one wasn't refused. And it was about 6,000 living immigrants got moved onto the death file last year. Real death dates, frozen counts, real frozen accounts, and the catastrophe didn't almost happen. It happened. The pilot already aired of this whole thing. And when Schofield pulled 25 names off the big list to check, citizens, teenagers, elderly people, a widow collecting the survivor benefits she earned. Not one of them was dead. Not one of them. And the paperwork said terrorists. But the reality was it was grandmas. The agency's own lawyers said that this is illegal. So they didn't stop. They renamed the folder. Death master file became ineligible master file. Because, and I quote the logic, death is a form of ineligibility. And that's not policy. That's relabeling the poison so the bottle reads vitamins. I already know my comments. Oh, they should have gotten their citizenship already. Well, there's two things here. One, citizens were on the list. The strongest status this country offers did not protect them. You can't out paperwork a government that's decided that your paperwork doesn't count. And two, a green card holder is following the rules, pays taxes, follows the law, builds a whole life here, and got targeted anyway. I know I've been married 20 years to a very legal immigrant. He's here legally. He's an Australian stuntman, gorgeous, jumps off buildings, somehow married me. But 20 years, permanent resident, he was never naturalized. He was never naturalized. And that's not laziness. The reason is if he becomes a citizen and we ever decided we wanted to go live in Australia, or if he decided he wanted to move back to Australia for some reason, he'd owe U.S. taxes plus Australian taxes for the rest of his life. So that's the whole crime. And in this system, that quiet, lawful choice is exactly what flags you as ineligible. Social Security's defense, they said, oh, well, we didn't add the 2.7 million names. But hear what they're not saying. Not that nobody wanted to do it. They're arguing about whether they pressed the button or not. The only thing that stopped it wasn't a judge or Congress. It was one man who pulled 25 names, saw a living widow, and said no. A democracy saved by the conscience of one mid-level employee is a democracy with no safety net. Remember the name Jeremiah Schofield, because next time the list might have yours on it, and you'd better hope someone still pulls some samples.